Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Carl Jung. This is Mysterium Conjuntionis. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, the link from my book where I teach you to do magic and live responsibly, and the links to get in contact with me directly or to just support the channel so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and conclude our exploration of the Mysterium Conjuntionis with the epilogue. This is going to be a short one today. We will do the wrap-up. Alchemy, with its wealth of symbols, gives us an insight into an endeavor of the human mind which could be compared with the religious rite, an opus divinum. I am in agreement with that. I talk all of the time, there's a separation between physical alchemy and spiritual alchemy, right? That I believe that the alchemist had the spiritual alchemy and were attempting to reproduce that in a misguided attempt to find a correlation in the as above, as below in everything. It is in most things. It is not in everything. I do believe that it is a process of self-enlightenment. I have outlined in here how I believe that that plays out. But it is, in my estimation, intrinsically a religious experience. It is dependent entirely upon the one true God, from my understanding. Now, I can be corrected in things, but there are many things that I will not be corrected in. One of the most important things that I will not be corrected in is that there is a God, that there is one God, and that he exists outside of creation. The difference between them is that the alchemical opus was not a collective activity rigorously defined as to its form and content, but rather, despite the similarity of their fundamental principles, an individual undertaking on which the adept staked his whole soul for the transcendental purpose of producing a unity. I am in agreement with that as well, right? It is not like I have outlined my path. This is the path that I have taken for enlightenment. I am at least an adept. I am on the road. I have healed myself in 4 ways. I healed my throat, my shoulder, my back, and my leg. This is something that you can go back and see evidentially happening as it unfolds through the videos of the last several years. The point of the process, it is a religious activity. The point of the process is to produce the unity, right? There is the as below powers is signified by these 3 lower balls and this dark one. It is the as above trinity, which is these 3 upper balls and this light one, brought together in the unity of the lapis philosophorum, or the philosopher's stone, which is the heart, and brought into conjunction, conjunctio, the oneness. That is, this large sphere represents the blending of both the negative and the positive into a moderation between the two. That is producing a unity. I do believe that that is the entire purpose of this. I believe that physical alchemy was an attempt to express that in physicality, but that at least a few of the alchemists actually had the understanding. Some of them didn't, right? Paracelsus apparently didn't, but Dorn did. It was a work of reconciliation between apparently incompatible opposites, which, characteristically, were understood not merely as the natural hostility of the physical elements, but at the same time as a moral conflict. And again, I will use my own example. Each one of these 7 balls right here in the middle represents intrinsic incompatible opposite. This red one at the bottom is love and wrath, right? The 2 opposites, giving away affection, not receiving it. Next up is lust and chastity, and then you have gluttony and denial, and then you have greed and charity. Then you have pride and humility, sloth and diligence, hope and despair. The 7 virtues, the 7 vices, diametric opposites, right? Love and wrath are diametrically opposed, but there is a combination point between them. And for that particular example, love and wrath, it's going to be kindness, right? You should act as though everybody else is human, because they are. Next, there's a balance between having sex and not. That is the sacred union. There is a balance between eating too much and not eating at all, right? That is moderation. There is a balancing point that is the central point of the moral conflict within yourself. You are not to give in entirely to the virtues or to the vices, but instead to use them both in moderation so that you can achieve the goals that you wish to achieve in life, to bring balance into your life and to unify yourself. It is not merely the natural hostility of the physical elements, air, earth, water, and fire, but instead is indeed, at the same time, a moral conflict. And the moderation points, right, the temperance points of all of these is written on your heart. You know that you want love. You know that you do not want to be acted upon in anger. And so you know that you should act in kindness. I mean, all of these things are written upon your heart. I did a video about that, but it really is true, right? You are intrinsically endowed with the understanding if you come to the understanding that it is there. Right? You may not identify that you do not want to be dealt with in wrath, and therefore you don't identify that you want to be dealt with in kindness. But once you come to the understanding that you don't want wrath in your life, but instead you would like some kindness, then you can start acting with kindness. That is a conflict, internal, related to yourself, that you have to discover. Since the object of this endeavor was seen outside as well as inside, as both physical and psychic, the work extended, as it were, through the whole of nature, and its goal consisted in a symbol which had an empirical and at the same time a transcendental aspect. And again, there is physical alchemy and there is spiritual alchemy. I believe that the spiritual alchemy actually came first, and that they used physical alchemy to try to replicate what had happened on an internal level, or just to express that in ways that would keep their head attached to their body. Just as in alchemy, tapping its way in the dark, groped through the endless mazes of theoretical assumptions and practical experiments over a course of many centuries, so the psychology of the unconscious that began with C.G. Caras took up the trail that had been lost by the alchemist. This happened, remarkably enough, at a moment in history when the aspirations of the alchemist had found their highest poetic expression in Goethe's Faust. At the time Caras wrote, he certainly could not have guessed that he was building the philosophical bridge to an empirical psychology of the future, which would take, quite literally, the old alchemical dictum, Instaurecor invenitur, it is found in filth. Not this time, in the cheap, unseemly substance which, rejected by all, could be picked up anywhere in the street, but rather in the distressing darkness of the human psyche, which, meanwhile, had become accessible to clinical observation. There alone could be found all those contradictions, those grotesque phantasms and scurrilous symbols which had fascinated the mind of the alchemist and confused them as much as illuminated them, and at the same time presented itself to the psychologist that had kept the alchemist in suspense for 1,700 years. What was he to do with these antagonistic forces? Could he throw them out and get rid of them? Or had he to admit their existence, and it is our task to bring them into harmony, and out of the multitude of contradictions, produce a unity, which naturally will not come of itself, though it may, Deo conscendente, with human effort. Yes, right? You are to not throw them out, right? You're not supposed to get rid of wrath and sexual desire and the want to consume things or pride, right? You're not to get rid of those things. You are to use them in moderation, to use them appropriately. When you do a job well, you should take pride in that. It doesn't make you better than other people, but it is something that you have done, and you've done it well. You should take pride in that. You should be proud of yourself. But there is a degree of humility that you should retain, right? You're not better than anybody because you can do a job better than them. They can do something else better than you can. That is a balance. There is a balance to be stricken there. And if false humility is just as bad as pride. If you do a job well and you deny that, that is false humility. That is you acting out of pride. And so you're not supposed to deny them. You're supposed to assimilate them. You're supposed to acknowledge them. To say, yes, I do have a tendency to fly off the handle. I'm a little bit wrathful, right? Now, for me in particular, that was an extreme problem, and I came to the realization that I was a monster because of that, right? I enjoyed it. I was good at it. I hurt people for fun and profit. Was I the best at it? No, there are a lot of people that can kick my ass, right? That was never the point. The point is that I can commit better than most people. That was an understanding that I had to come to about myself. Nobody could have told me that. And if you would have told me that, it would have caused me to react in anger. I had to discover that for myself. I had to admit to myself that this was a truth in my life, right? And so you're not supposed to throw them out and get rid of them. You have to admit their existence and to bring them into harmony. Or what's another word for harmony? Balance. What is the word that we use most often on this channel? Balance. And out of the multitude of contradictions, there were 14 of them listed right here. 7 contradictions, 14 elements, right? 21 elements if you want to look at it that way. And even then, there's 8, 16, and 24. So, Herbert Silberer has the merit of being the first to discover the secret threads that lead from alchemy to the psychology of the unconscious. The state of psychological knowledge at that time was still too primitive and still too much wrapped up in personalistic assumptions for the whole problem of alchemy to be understood psychologically. The conventional devaluation of alchemy, on the one hand, and of the psyche on the other, had first to be cleared away. Today, we can see how effectively alchemy prepared the ground for the psychology of the unconscious. Firstly, by leaving behind in its treasury of symbols illustrative material of the utmost value for modern interpretations in this field. And secondly, by indicating symbolical procedures for synthesis, which we can rediscover in the dreams of our patients. We can see today that the entire alchemical procedure for uniting the opposites, which I have described in the foregoing, and I have described in this book, could just as well represent the individuation process of a single individual, though with the not unimportant difference that no single individual ever attains to the richness and scope of the alchemical symbolism. This has the advantage of having been built up through the centuries, whereas the individual, in his short life, has at his disposal only a limited amount of experience and limited powers of portrayal. It is, therefore, a difficult and thankless task to try to describe the nature of the individuation process from case material, since one aspect tends to predominate in one case and another in another, and one case begins earlier and another later, and the psychic conditions vary without limit. Only one or the other version or phase of the process can be demonstrated in any given instance. No case, in my experience, is comprehensive enough to show all the aspects in such detail that it could be regarded as paradigmatic. Anyone who attempted to describe the individuation process with the help of case material would have to remain content with a mosaic of bits and pieces without beginning or end. And if he wanted to be understood, he would have to count on a reader whose experience in the same field was equal to his own. Right? This is saying that you cannot give the specifics, right? That is one of the other things that I talk about, right? I have given a path, right? This is a way. It may not be the way, it may not be the path, but this is the path that I use to find my way. I'm here holding up a light on this path, right? This is where I am. This is how I got here. Here is my light. You can follow it if you wish. You can get on the same path. You can get on a path adjacent to it, hopefully with some clearer defined terms. But there is no part of this that is going to be particular to your experience as opposed to mine. I mean, I even tried to keep it very generalized in how that played out, right? I didn't get into the specifics of me investigating each and every one of the chakras. I merely talked about finding the balance in the chakras. Because if I get into the individual of my process, somebody might say, well, I've walked a similar path and therefore this has to be my exact process. And it's not, right? This has worked for me. I have physically manifested healing in my life. I want to stress that. But even so, this is just a guidebook. I believe that this will allow anyone to do the exact same thing that I did. I do not believe that I am special, other than I actually listen to my intuition and I am dedicated enough to put into practice the things that I have learned. Most people do not have either one of those two key elements. In addition to that, I am remarkably open, right? I have very high trade openness, and so my ability to self-reflect is a little bit better than other people's. And again, that is not a prideful statement. It is simply fact. I do not get offended when it gets pointed out that I do things wrong. I self-reflect and I understand, oh yeah, well that is wrong. Or, no, actually you're wrong, right? But I do the work. I don't take it for granted that I know everything or that I know even most, right? I have had effects, but I'm still fairly new to this as a intentional process, right? Some of this information I've had for decades, never took action upon it. I have, in the last half a decade, taken action upon it, and it has led to significant changes in my life, like unidentifiable from my previous existence. I am a completely, totally different person in every single aspect of my life. Every single part of my response, every single part of the way that I take in the information has shifted. I no longer give primary concern to the things that I used to, and now I have new primary concerns. Everything is different. But all of that is very specific to me, right? You will have to deal with your love and wrath. You will, right? But it's not going to be the same way that I did. So I don't need to put into the book how I did it. I need to put into the book that it is necessary to do so. The same with all 7 of these balls. You will have to deal with all 7 virtues and all 7 vices. You will have to pull the energy in 2 directions. Those are things that I stand upon rather firmly. There's not a lot spiritually that I stand on firmly outside of these definitional things. There is a God. Logos is completely misunderstood. It is the expression of God inside of the infinite, inside of the finite, right? That you have to manipulate the energies if you wish to achieve the Philosopher's Stone, right? You have to pull the energy up and down. It is a 3-part process. It's up, down, and then the combination of the 2. If you skip a step, you do not get to the end result at all. That was Jung's problem. He lacked the resolution, right? He lacked the end definition, right? He did not reach the end goal. He did not create the Philosopher's Stone for himself. He read a lot about it. He conjectured about it. He even extracted some good things from it. But he never created it. And so he did not understand what he did not have. It is a very, very individualized process. I believe that these things correlate to the MBTI stack, that your shadow element will fall in line with your wrath and love matrix. But I can be wrong about that part. I have not had the clinical experience with experimenting, right? I haven't had a wide dearth of people to practice upon so that I can come to conclusions. I have to make assumptions, and I made assumptions, but I try to be fairly clear about that too. I believe that the stack will line up here, and that you got your demon and your trickster, and then you have the solar plexus is the nourishment, and then you have your true desires, which is the heart, and then you have your miscommunications and your misunderstandings, right? Each one of these, I believe, is key to a fundamental part of the way that you receive and give back information. That is related to psychoanalysis. That is derivative from Carl Jung's work. And yet he never got there. He never completed the process, but I created this from his process. The different steps lead people to different destinations, not definitions. I believe that I have a higher understanding, but I am willing to be corrected upon it. I am holding up the light so that you can try to find if this works for you. It may not. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, right? If it does, I'm happy, right? That is the point of this, is to help as many people as possible to do the things that I talk about here. And what is that? I have physically healed myself. I have mentally healed myself. And I have spiritually healed myself. And yes, those are three different things. Back to the text. This is a short one, so I don't feel bad talking too much. Alchemy, therefore, has performed for me the great and invaluable service of providing material in which my experience could find sufficient room, and has thereby made it possible for me to describe the individuation process, at least in its essential aspects. And that is going to bring us to the end of our exploration of the Mysterium Conjunctio. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I do have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. The toes that I step on are the toes of presupposition. They are the toes of my way is the only way. They are the toes of this book wrote this thing down 2,000 years ago, and so therefore it's the truth. Just because thousands or even millions of people have apologized for it does not make it the truth. I am eminently concerned with the truth. Now, the truth is nebulous, right? Grasping the truth is like trying to grasp smoke. It flows through your fingers fairly efficiently, but there are some truths, right? God is real. That is a truth. I stand upon that despite any naysayer. Nobody has a good understanding of it, however, myself included, right? I have, right, chapter 1 in this book is my understanding of that. It is linked up here, right? The standalone video that is linked in the corner is going to be the divinity and the divine and the Trinity explained. That is chapter 1 of this book. That is me attempting to explain God. But that is probably the most prideful thing that I did in the entire book. And I tried to do it with humility. It is a very generalized understanding, right? Before the beginning there was God, and God was infinite and without form, and he decided to limit himself into the creation, and therefore became the creation. That is very simple. Now, the video, the chapter, it's about 20 minutes long. You can go and peruse it. It's basically what I just stated with the explanations attached. That is not just idle speculation, but rather derivative from a multitude of sources through inspiration, which I firmly and fully believe is divinely guided, to bring about a better understanding than the current ones. And I say ones because there is a lot of individual understandings about the divine that are definitely not correct, right? God never walked among people. Not a possibility. God is quite literally the entirety of existence. Every single thing that is in existence anywheres. Me, you, this cup of tea, the space between us, the space between the space between us. All of that is God. in my understanding. What I attempted to bring into the conversation is that maybe some of the source material is wrong. Maybe some of the source material didn't fully explain or did not adequately explain some of the concepts that are attached to them. Some of them are directly misrepresented, right? The prophecy of the virgin birth is a deliberate misrepresentation of the prophecy contained within Isaiah. It was intentionally misrepresented to deceive you. Do not get that twisted. But some of the understanding that came about from that intentional misrepresentation actually led to some pretty good things, right? Now, are there problems with that? Yeah. Nobody had to die for you to be forgiven from sin. That is a major stumbling block for most people. This has been an extremely beneficial study, right? Even if almost nobody watches them, and I went into this with that understanding, right? Most of what I do on this channel is not going to appeal to the masses. It requires you to self-reflect. That is intrinsically oppositional to most people's predispositions, right? Most people are not disposed to internal reflection. It is much easier to sit around and watch Netflix and play around on video games than it is to take the time to do the intentional work to correct yourself in the manner that you need to be corrected. But there is truth that can be found in any of the systems. I have and will continue to firmly state you can find God in any of the control systems, whether that is Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or Jainism or Zoroastrianism or Hinduism or whatever ism you so choose. You can find God in it. If you follow parts of the teachings, right? If you follow the 5 or the pillars of Islam, I think it's 5, it might be 7. But if you follow that, then you are absolutely going to be okay. Sorry, I got interrupted. I lost my train of thought. But the main point of that is, if you are following the good parts, right? The parts that are telling you to do good, you're probably going to be all right. There are some misleading parts in all of the source materials. There is no justification whatsoever for beating someone in the head with a stone because they have infracted some minor religious violation. Picking up sticks on the wrong day, violating the Sabbath, has never been and will never be a good reason for ending someone's life. But that is doctrinal to Judaism. There is no part of someone's sexual decisions that allows you, who is not involved in that, to hit them in the head with a stone. That is intrinsic to Islam. If you follow those particular teachings of either one of those religions, it will have negative consequences upon your life. You are not enacting the will of God. You will absolutely face some very severe repercussions from that, even if it is not from the legal system. You will feel it in your life. But if you listen to the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, you're going to be okay, right? You're going to be fine if you were going out and treating people with kindness and with generosity and all of the balance points in here, which, by the way, get talked about there, right? If you do that, you're going to be okay. But there are other parts of that you may not, right? There are the dependence upon someone else being your salvation. That's a problem. But it's not going to keep you from going to God when you're done here. Right? You're just going to get there and be like, oh, well, I just took that the wrong way. Right? As long as you're following the positive side of the control systems, you're going to be all right. Right? Now, there are greater understandings that can be taken from those control systems. Right? And by control systems, I mean the religious institutions in this particular case, but it can be governmental systems as well. You have to make the decisions for yourself. You have to decide for yourself whether you are going to follow this or follow that, whether this aligns with your morals or whether that does. Most of what is in Christianity I comport with. Some of it I don't. Some of it I am actually diametrically opposed to, right? The denial of sexual union, that is negative. Even from the original source material, what was the commandment given to Noah by God, right? He come down from the ark after the destruction of the world. He's the last man left, him and his children, right? And God comes down and says, you did good, right? And what did he tell him to do? Go forth, be fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth, be a steward thereof, shed no blood of man. By the way, you can eat meat now, that's a whole thing, but what part of that makes you think that it is okay to kill another person? Right? Because they picked up sticks on the wrong day, you can shed the blood of man? Okay. Because this guy tells you that it is better to never have sex, which, by the way, is misinterpreted, right? That's okay to go against the command of God given to Noah to be fruitful and multiply? To deny sexual activity? That is prideful, right? That is superseding the demands of God with religiosity. That is going to lead you in the wrong direction. You are almost certainly meant to share your soul in sacred union with a single person. That is true for 99.999% of the population. There's always the vanishing percentages that it is not. But for almost everyone, you are meant to have sexual relations. You are meant to take pride in your work. You are meant to have possessions. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. There are good things contained in Christianity. There are bad things. There are good things in Islam. There are bad things. There are good things in Judaism. There are bad things. I don't know that I can make that equivocation for Catholicism, but for most of the Protestant religions as well. For the most part, writ large, if you are following the good instructions, you're going to be okay dependent upon the control system. But there are things intentionally placed in there to hold you back from attainment of the things that I talk about. They are control systems meant to make you give away your authority in your own life. And that is a problem. Jung never completed the process. That is evident from his writings. Some of the other references, Dorn, for example, did. And we are going into that next. We'll be in the Theatrum Chemicum next, where we'll be dealing with most of the source material from this book. I don't expect great viewership, right? This video, almost nobody's going to watch the epilogue to a study on the Mysterium Conjuntionis. But a few of you will. And those few that do, you will extract the value, right? That is why I am doing this. I am reading into the record, correcting into the record, spelling into the record, so to speak, what is actually the fulfillment of the process that is described, right? Again, two processes. There is the physical alchemy, which is dealing with the actual chemicals and retorts and alembics. And then the internal, which I believe was the progenitor to the physical external manifestation. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up, right? There's not a whole lot here today, I'm aware, and this is just a wrap up to point out there was a lot of meat in this study. I am very happy with it, even though it will not almost certainly produce physical effects, right? There's not a lot of people going to watch these videos. There's not going to be a whole lot of people watch the next ones, but I'm going to grind them out. We're going to go through this and correct the record every single step along the way, whether anybody joins or not. Right? This is the path that is upon. I have already affected change in my life. But more importantly to me, I have allowed other people to affect change in their life in the way that they want to through the things that I have talked about, whether on the channel or in the book. And so, if you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership, picking up a copy of the book, or reaching out through any of the links provided down below. I do have services available, right? That is coming online as we speak. Dowsing, tarot reading, energetic cleansings, all kinds of things. So if you're interested, definitely check out the links down below. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole and complete just the way that you are. And this has been pittstake. Peace.